So we see that even Prophet Habakkuk, he had questions. So we also should not hesitate to question God. And Habakkuk is teaching us that we need to go to God when our hearts are troubled with questions. And when we go to God, He will give us the answers and He will also put our hearts at peace. And we just went through Philippians, and there also Paul reminded us then when we have worries or when we have anxieties, we should turn to God, and He will give us the peace that passeth all understanding. And Psalm 121 and verse 1, it's the same. It says, I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. So we can ask ourselves, why do we sometimes struggle and uh, to understand God's plan or to understand God's timing? We read in Isaiah 55 and verse 8, For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So God's ways are much higher, and that is the reason why we often struggle with questions in our life. And Deuteronomy 29 says, The secret things belong unto the Lord our God. So God may not reveal everything to us, and what He expects is what is revealed to us. We should be obedient, we should be submissive. And Romans 11:33 again reminds us, "O the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are His judgments, and His ways past finding out." And Psalm 77:19, Thy way is in the sea, Thy path in the great waters, and Thy footsteps are not known. So it is not uncommon for us to go through seasons in our life where we continue to struggle with questions, we continue to struggle with the ways of God or His plans of God or the timing of God. But we should not leave our trust in God. We should continue to trust in God. We should continue to go back to Him, and God will reveal what He wants to reveal and what He wants us to know when the time is right. So Habakkuk verses 1 through 4, we'll read that. It says, The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. Why dost thou show me iniquity, and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are that raise up strife and contention. Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never prevail. For the wicked doth compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. So even in the first four verses, we see the two questions being raised, how long and why, which seems to be the theme. So the two questions focus on God's silence. Firstly, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? And the second question could be on God's response to evil. Why is it that the righteous are suffering and the evil doers go unpunished? Again, those are not uncommon questions. Those are questions that we often have. Why is it that we are praying earnestly, but God is not hearing or responding? And secondly, why is there so much evil in this world? Or why are the unrighteous prospering, whereas the righteous continue to suffer, continue to be exploited? So the verse 1, the burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see. So the vision that is given to Habakkuk is a vision that he sees as a burden. It could be due to the gravity of the message or how God is going to respond to sin. And and when we read the prophetic chapters, oftentimes the news that is coming out is the news of God's judgment or God's response to sin. And here again, when God is speaking to Habakkuk, again, he sees the vision as a burden, maybe because of the message that is being communicated. And that's similar to what we read in Isaiah 13:1, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah, the son of Amos, did see. So, how long is a common cry of believers, and we see it many times, especially in the book of Psalms. Psalm 6:3, where it says, "My soul is also sore vexed, but thou, O Lord, how long?" And Psalm 13:1 and 2, "How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever, how long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me?" And again, Psalm 35:17, "Lord, how long wilt thou look upon? Rescue my soul from their destructions." And Psalm 79:5, "How long, Lord, wilt thou be angry forever?" And Psalm 89:46, "How long, Lord, wilt thou hide thyself forever?" So we see that the expression of how long is not something uncommon. So when we go through similar experiences, we should not feel guilty, or we should not feel that we are unique, or uh, we are weak believers, because we find that even those who are strong in the Lord, they also go through seasons where they are unable to understand God's ways. They are unable to comprehend God's timing, and they get anxious, or they may get frustrated or sad. But we know that God's delays are not denials when we look at the scriptures from Genesis and all the way to the end. And we find that God often makes us wait to test our patience. He makes us wait to strengthen our faith. And sometimes He makes us wait so that He can prepare us to receive that gift. So we might be wanting God to bless us in a certain way, but we may not be ready to receive that gift. So it could be a marriage, it could be a job, it could be something else that we want. So God wants to prepare us before He would answer us or bless us. And we also find through waiting upon the Lord, through going through seasons of waiting, it also draws us closer to the Lord, and we are able to worship the Lord through a deeper experience in spirit and in truth. And we also note that God's delays are not, some of God's delays could actually be rejections, where God is not really delaying, He's telling us no. And that would be the case when our desires or our prayers are not aligned with God's will. So every delay is not a waiting time. In case of some delays, we should understand that the door has been shut and God is saying no. So we should have the discernment to distinguish between when there is a delay and when there is a denial from God. And we know that Hannah's prayer for a child, it was delayed, but it was not denied. So in the same way in our life, we might be waiting for different things. So we should not assume that God is not hearing. We should not assume that God has rejected our prayers. It is quite possible that God is simply delaying the answer to our prayers so that He can make us strong in the Lord, and He can also prepare us before receiving the gift. And verses 3 and 4 speak about what is happening in Judah. Judah, where the nation is, we can say, in a state of sin and rebellion against God and also against one another. So, verse 3 says, "Why dost thou show me iniquity?" And speaks about grievance, speaks about spoiling and violence, speaks about strife and contention, and speaks about the law being ineffective. So we know that when the law is ineffective, there is no order in the society, and everything will be out of sync. And that is the condition that Judah was in. The law was not really being enforced, and everyone seemed to be doing what was right, or what was good for them. And the righteous were being surrounded by the wicked, and instead of justice, wrong judgments were proceeding or in force. So the question that Habakkuk had, since Judah had become totally corrupt and lawless, uh, the question could be, why is God allowing his children to backslide or fall into sin? Or if the children are falling into sin, why isn't God intervening and punishing them? Because that is what he said, that if you disobey, then there would be a punishment. But Habakkuk sees that the punishment is missing, and also many are suffering. Many of the righteous are suffering. And as we read, the righteous are being surrounded by the wicked, and the law had become ineffective. And one more thing that we note is that Habakkuk is a prophet, but he's vigilant to what is happening in the society, and he is bringing his burdens to the Lord. And in the same way, all of us live in a society, we live in an environment where we see many shortcomings, we see many sins, we see many things that are not right. And if that is the case, we should not be indifferent, we should not be passive to what is happening around us, and we should not give up. We should pray, and we should ask God to intervene. So we see that people, even in this country and even back in India, where many youth they are protesting against the education the corruption. Uh, but we don't need to protest. We have a better solution. We can pray and we can ask God to intervene. And we remember Second Chronicles 7:14, where it says, "If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." And maybe that is what the nation of Judah needed to do at that point. They were living in sin, they were living in wicked ways, and had they repented, God would have listened, and maybe the outcome would have been different. And in verses 5 through 11, we see God's answer, which is essentially God's judgment of Judah for all of their sin and all of their rebellion. So when Habakkuk is asking, uh, why hasn't God done anything about it? So God is giving him the answer that he is not indifferent or he is not blind to what is happening in the nation of Judah. He already has a plan in place to bring about judgment to the nation of Judah. But the way God executes a judgment on the nation of Judah, that is surprising. And that is what leads to the second question that Habakkuk has, which we find in chapter 2. But today we'll focus on 5 through 11. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe someone could read 5 through 11.
Behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land, to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves. Their horses also are swifter than the leopards, and are more fierce than the evening wolves. And their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far, for they shall fly as the eagle that hasted to eat. They shall come all for violence, their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. And they shall scoff at the kings, and the princes shall be a scorn unto them. They shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust and take it. Then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing this his power unto his God.
Okay, so this is the response of God, and we can see that it is expressed in a rather poetic way. Uh, and the basic response is what we find in verse 5, where God says, I will work a work in your days, which you will not believe, though it be told you. So God is telling Habakkuk that he's going to bring about judgment, and it would be a great judgment. And it is something that he could not have imagined, or it is not something that he could have planned. So we often see that is how God works. When we go to God in prayer, he is able to answer our prayers much beyond our asking or even thinking. And even when we look at our life on hindsight, we see that the path that the Lord has brought us to, it is not something that we could have planned on our own. So that is why God's ways are much higher than our ways. His thoughts are much higher than our thoughts. So we simply have to trust in God. We need to trust in God's timing for everything that is happening in our life. So God is not deaf, God is not blind. And here God is telling Habakkuk that he is going to do an amazing work of justice, something that he will not believe, even though it be told you. So Judah will be punished for its disobedience and transgression of laws. And the surprising thing, which Habakkuk finds, is how God is going to bring about justice. God is going to use Chaldeans or the Babylon, who are also a heathen nation, to bring about justice on the nation of Judah. So again, that is surprising. God is not using righteous people to bring about justice against the nation of Judah, but he's actually using heathens as an instrument to bring about that justice. And that surprises Habakkuk, and that is why he asks the second question. So, uh, so Assyria had captured Israel, and they had also made inroads into Judah. So they were a powerful nation. But within a few years, Babylon emerges as a strong power, and they conquer Assyria, Egypt, and Judah. So Habakkuk is writing it in this context where Babylon is going to emerge, and eventually they will destroy Judah. And he describes the might of Babylonian power as something that is ruthless and that evokes a fear among people. That was something that was said of the Israelites when they were conquering nations. Nations were fearful of Israelites, but now the reverse is true. Uh, Even though they are heathen, they are evoking fear in that area. And they do not respect the law, and their horses are described as being faster than leopards and more fierce than the wolves. Their army is described as something that is fast, and their focus is on violence, and they would scoop up the prisoners of war as sand. So again, it is described in a poetic sense that the might of Babylonian army, like they would be able to simply walk in and take up prisoners of war, just like we would pick up sand on the in the beach. And they would mock the kings, the rulers, and they would breach the city walls. They would breach the walls, which are supposed to be a fortress, which is supposed to bring security, but they will be able to breach all of that and enter and destroy. So Judah, without God, there will be no match for the might of Babylon. So they will come, they will conquer, they will plunder, and they will also take them into exile around 587 BC, and they will be in exile for about 70 years. So this was the prophecy that was made, and we know that the prophecy also came true. King Nebuchadnezzar, he took over Jerusalem in stages. So the initial conquest, it took place, and King Joachim, he was taken as a prisoner. So we can read about that in Second Kings chapter 24 and 25. Then after that, King Zedekiah was appointed as the king of Judah, but under Babylon control. And finally, Jerusalem is taken over in 587 BC, and the Jews would remain in exile for about 70 years before they come back in batches and rebuild Jerusalem, as we read about in the book of Ezra. And we're not going to read this, but when we read 2 Kings chapter 24 and chapter 25, we see that the prophecy of destruction is fulfilled. Uh, as it says, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And verse 13 says, and he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon, the king of Israel, had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And we see the second attack in 2 Kings chapter 25, verses 1, 2, and other verses. And again it says, the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah, and he burnt the house of the Lord and the king's house and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire, and all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captain of the guard break down the walls of Jerusalem round about. And then they carried them away as fugitives, as slaves. Yeah. And verse 11 ends with these words, imputing this, his power, unto his gods. So the Babylonians thought that they were able to conquer and destroy and plunder Judah because they were strong and because they were mighty, and they were attributing their victory to their God. And obviously, they were ignorant that it is God who was using them as instruments to bring justice on the nation of Judah. So God can choose anyone to accomplish his purposes. And later on, we see that God brings justice upon Babylon and he wipes them out. So for their pride, they will also get wiped out, as it says in Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So oftentimes we see that also in our life. When we are victorious, we start giving credit to ourselves. We become proud. We fail to recognize that it is only by God's grace, it is only by God's favor in our life that we are able to enjoy many victories. We are able to enjoy many blessings. But when we reach the point of blessing, or when we reach the point of prosperity in our life, oftentimes we become proud. But the Bible warns us that pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So one lesson that we can learn is that God is always at work. Habakkuk, when he started this chapter, he was questioning whether God was really listening, whether God was really hearing, whether God was really observing. But God, in his response, is able to show us that he is always at work. So maybe God was preparing the Babylonian army for an appointed time to bring justice on the nation of Judah. So one lesson we can take away is that we should not question God's justice or God's timing. We should learn to simply trust in God in all seasons of life. So even in those seasons where we don't really understand God's ways or God's plans or God's purposes or God's timing, even in those difficult and challenging seasons, we should believe that God is at work and that He would bring everything to an expected end according to His plan and purposes for our life. So Psalm 121:4 reminds us, behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. And we often question the justice of God, just like Habakkuk was questioning the lack of justice from God. But we find in Psalm 89 and verse 14, justice, and judgment are the habitation of thy throne. So even today, many people question why God is not doing anything about the evil or anything about the evil people. But we know that day will come where God will judge the evil, God will judge the sinners. In the same way, if we are facing injustice in our life, we also can be assured that God is at work and he would never be unjust uh, in his dealings with his children. And when we went to the book of Daniel, we came across this verse in Daniel chapter 10 and verse 12, which reminds us that our prayers are heard instantly. So there is no waiting time. The moment we pray, our prayers are heard by God. So just because God is not responding does not mean that our prayers were not heard. So Daniel chapter 10 and verse 12, this is a beautiful verse which says, Then he said to me, Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. So because Daniel prayed, God also responded, but God is also telling him that his prayers were heard right from first day. So all prayers of believers when we approach the Lord with cleansed hearts, when we approach the throne based on the imputed righteousness of Lord Jesus Christ, when we approach with faith, when we approach with expectation, we know that all of our prayers would be heard instantly and they would also be answered in God's time. So, as God's children, we should believe that our prayers are never in vain and all of our prayers are going to the throne. And God may not answer all of the prayers the way we want, but He does hear all our prayers. So we can ask ourselves, we also might have unanswered questions in our life, just like Habakkuk had. And we can ask whether we are able to see God at work in our life, or do we find God to be silent, or God to be missing, or God to be indifferent in our life. So that's also a good test of our relationship with the Lord. We should be able to see that God is always at work and God is not distant, God is not indifferent, and God is always the person that we have to go to. If you have questions, we don't need to go to our friends, we don't need to go to our relatives. We simply have to go to the Lord and He would give us the answer. So we'll stop here and see if we have any additional comments, thoughts.